Tanya's going to be the main star of the show, but just like to give a wee bit of a background and try and frame the conversation. So I'll share screen because I've just got a little diagram that I would like to share. Rightio. So there was a little, how would you call it, framework that someone shared with me several months ago. And I thought, actually, this probably fits this quite well. So they refer to it as the grown zone. And effectively, it's made up of 3 concentric circles. Comfortable zone. This is where we operate a lot of the time. Then there's this grown zone. And on the outside of that is a growth zone. And so a lot of people they'll go, right, we know there's some need for change, and they'll try to go out of their comfort zone towards this growth zone. And then all of a sudden it goes, oh, actually, this felt too hard, and they come back to their comfort zone. And I think that's been the case for a lot of people. Whereas if you can just persist and push through that grown zone, you'll get to that growth zone. So I'll just using this model for context. So we're in the comfort zone. For a lot of us, we contributed to the CSNZ salary survey for years, for decades, and we knew what we got. And look, it suited our needs. It was much better than not having anything. It was simple. It was actually really surveyor focused, which a lot of our firms were, or to some of us still are. But for a number of other firms, we've all evolved, or a number of firms have evolved beyond surveying. We've got engineers, planners, you name it, it's in there. And so my feeling when I suggested that, hey, and Dan Williams from Woods, he was the one that really brought this to my attention and suggested, hey, maybe it's worth looking at, because there were limitations as we perceived it, particularly for, if we said non-standard survey firms. The CSNZ, the old original salary survey, didn't quite hit those. And so there's still a lot of concerns, and I understand it. There are people who have struggled with or don't see the benefit in shifting over. It's too complex for our needs. It feels like it's built for the big guys. It's not for us smaller guys. We run a lot leaner than that. It just takes too much time to fill out. And look, it looks unfamiliar. We just want salary numbers. We're not into HR strategy and look, it's just overkill. I just want to know how much a graduate or a technician or a surveyor is paid. But again, things have changed. We are really competing for talent. And so we kind of need better information. And yeah, look, while the old survey served a purpose, I'm not sure, and from my perspective, that it still meets that purpose. So to get out of that comfort zone, we need to do something different. And what I want us to do is get to that growth zone, which is really getting a little bit more sophisticated with packages, the employment packages. And so we need better data. And that was the other thing. With the old salary survey, we had one database here, which was the CSNZ members. But then we had a number of firms that go, well, I'm not going to do 2 salary surveys, so I'll just do the ACE New Zealand survey. And all of a sudden, we have this split database of salaries or data around salaries. So I certainly did encourage CSNZ to trial it and give it a go. And we did have a number of people take it up in the first year, and it has dropped again. So hence CSNZ is running this, and we're very keen to share our perspective of it. So getting through that messy middle, that groan zone, and we were just talking before to someone at the start of the session or before it started, and just giving it a couple of goes, but I don't know, it's very frustrating. And just throw your pen at the door and leave it. But again, I would encourage to push through it. And this is, hopefully Tonya will give you some good tips and tricks, or just an overview of how to get through it. So get through to that growth zone. The bottom line is we are competing, not just amongst CSNZ members, but all of the companies that employ survey staff, employ engineers, employ planners, whatever your staff makeup is, we are competing for talent. And if we think we're paying a market rate based on one subset of data, not the full picture, we may not actually be competing on level terms. We may actually be competing on flawed data. And the other aspect of it was not everybody within a role is equal within that role. There can be this band, and Tonya will talk us through that a little bit as well. So you'll have some people who are really excellent and some people who are maybe not quite as excellent. So how do they sit relative to a number? What else? So again, what I would dearly love to see is that we all can contribute to one comprehensive database. And the reality is, for a lot of those bigger companies, they're not going to compete, they're not going to contribute to the old CSNZ salary survey. So hence, I was suggesting we go over to the ACE one. There's a whole lot in the strategic pay report, and just like filling it out, when you read that report, there's a lot of information. Once you know what you want and where to go, you can ignore all of the other information and just focus on the stuff that's going to help you. So, I mean, it can talk about salary pressures that are happening in specialist roles and how that relates to inflation. It exposes where you might have risks in retention. So the past report talked about in that 3 to 7 year mark, provides tools for benchmarking and structuring teams across different disciplines. And again, this may or may not relate to everybody. I understand that, but it is still a tool that you can use how you want to use it. And there's other information there in terms of not just salary, but there's other aspects that if you choose, you can read up about the people and culture aspect of it as well. The other thing to acknowledge is if you're a very small 1 to 3 person type company, yes, you can't contribute to the salary survey, but CSNZ is making that available to those people because those companies can't contribute, but it does not make that information any less valid. And why can't those companies contribute? Well, strategic pay has quite clearly said that for the small companies, there's a fair majority, not all of them. The information can skew the salaries survey because they may not pay themselves market rate. And in the end, it doesn't matter for those people because they'll get it in dividends or they get it in salary. However, it does skew the data. So that's the reason why the smaller companies aren't able to contribute. But again, CSNZ is going to make that available so that the smaller companies are not disadvantaged. And it's not about just a tick box exercise. It is actually, we're trying to get a comprehensive database that we can all use to make better, more reliable decisions, I guess. I guess that's probably, look, I fully am on board with this, and I do want you to contribute as well. Tonya is saying, look, we'll pass over the information. If you've got questions, maybe if you can feed it through rather than directly to Tonya, if you can feed it through Wendy at CSNZ, and that can then come through to us. Right, I'll hand over to Tonya now. I'll just set up the slideshow for Tonya.
And check it for me if you like.
I can do the clicking. Excellent. Yeah. And we'll just share.
Hi, everybody. It is kind of weird talking to people when you can't see them. So I'll just assume that you're nodding along. And if you do have questions while I'm going through this presentation, pop them in the chat and we'll try and address them as we go.
Yeah, I can't see them as they come up. So
well, we'll pause and have a look at the end.
Yeah.
Okay. So where I was coming from when I filled this in was just trying to say what's made this easy for me, because I actually come from an engineering background, not doing salary surveys, and I sort of like things that are black and white and I can just move through quite quickly. And I found when I first went into this survey to try and enter data, there's just a lot of information fields and it just turns you off. That groan zone you're talking about, I've experienced that. So my focus in this is just trying to communicate how you can make it easier for you. So the main points I'm going to go through is why bother, how you might go about it, and just some quick tips. So the why bother, sort of what Carl's saying is that strategic pay database has already got 1,400 organisations or something like that. And they've got already 97 CSNZ members contributing with 12,000 employees. So it's already got heaps of data in it that you get to benefit from. By contributing, you get to actually get the benefit of that data. And the real reason you're doing that is so that you can be really confident that you have relevant market information when you do your pay reviews with your staff. Another key reason is that when you do the survey, it's the employers who are putting in the data. So it's quite often, you know, whoever administers the payroll or the business manager, they'll be the person putting in the survey, whereas some other surveys, as an employee, you put the data in yourself. The obvious benefit of the person doing the payroll putting in that information is it's not going to be biased at all. They're going to put in the data that they actually pay. So you can sort of trust that that data is real. When you get the output report, as Carl has said, and you are probably already aware, there's a whole host of information, and that it's pretty easy to, once you know your way around the report, to slice it to say, oh, I want to compare this role nationally, or I want to just compare this role amongst people in the South Island or people in Canterbury. And depending on what your context is, that can be very, very helpful. Yeah. So how do you go about doing the survey? An overview, my main point would be do a bit of preparation before you click go. And that preparation is to do the survey, you have to have chosen a job code for every position that you're going to put in. And so the words that the survey uses is you'll get a primary job code for each of your team members.
I'll ask you a question here, Tonya, just
as
part of this. So in terms of matching a job code, if you haven't seen the survey before, how do you do that?
When you first get your entry email, there's a link there with job codes, and that matches. They've got a description there of the old CSNZ code, if you were familiar with that survey, to the strategic pay codes. So it is actually fairly easy to say, okay, I've got a graduate who's got 1 year experience. This was the old code. This is the job code for this survey.
Cool. Thank you.
But you kind of need to get your head around that before you start, because that's the most important data that you put in is the description of the job, like graduate surveyor, the job code that goes with that, and then their pay details. So ensuring that you've got the correct pay data for every person. And when I say the pay data, you need to know their full picture. So how is their salary package broken up? Is it a base salary? Do they have superannuation? Do they have medical insurance? Do they have a vehicle? Whatever the makeup is of every person's package, that you know the detail for it. Because you're going to put that into an Excel spreadsheet, which is pretty easy if you already know it. The other thing that you need to have is a copy of your relevant financials for your company information. Now, for some of you, that's in your head. But for me, because I'm not the business manager here, I'd get our finance manager to give me that key information. But it's really easy information like that you can find. Okay, so the first hurdle, if you like, once you decided I'm going to do it, is to log in. So you let Wendy or Strategic Pay know, yes, I do want to do this survey, and they send you an email with login details. From there, you get a password. And with that password, obviously, you can just log in then as many times as you like. You don't have to do it all in one go, because you can enter the survey and pop out again, and it will save your information, so you can go in multiple times.
And do you have to press save?
No, it automatically saves until the very, very end. You push a done button, and then it's gone away. So here's what it looks like. So this was sent to Carl. It's saying click here to participate. And if you see down the bottom of this page, it says refer to the job code list right on the bottom sentence and the REM survey guide for help. So those two documents, when you open them, will show you that position job code information that I was talking about. So it's worth clicking on those links. Right, so this is when you actually click on the login, you get this screen, and you have to request a one-time password, which is kind of like their security. It's like a 2FA kind of thing. So just click on that, and then it sends you an email with your passcode. You put that in, and you only have to do that once. And after that, you just log in from your desk. If you're the person who got that email sent to you, then you'll get the code and you'll click verify and you're away. Then the next step, go back. You've got that click here to download a spreadsheet. So after you've done your login, that is where you enter the pay data in that spreadsheet. So that's the login process. So you've logged in, and the very first couple of pages that you get is asking you information about your company financial data. That information does take quite a bit of time when you haven't done it before, but the good thing to know is it stays there in following years. So in the following year, of course, your revenue might have changed, but it's in there, and you just go, oh, this year's revenue is this, or our employee numbers this year are this. It's much easier than putting in that first time.
So in talking with Tonya and Lisa, the first year definitely was the longest, but subsequent years, it's been around about 2.5 hours for one person to complete a salary survey for a team of 14.
And that is assessing the job codes, entering all the data, and answering loads of questions that not everybody would want to answer.
Right.
Okay, so after the financial information, you'll complete that pay details spreadsheet, which you downloaded in that previous slide. And the important thing in there is you'll know your job code and relevant pay data, because that goes in that Excel spreadsheet. And again, you can skip requests for any other data in the survey. If you don't have it or think it's irrelevant, you just skip it. So that company data, again, it's just asking for the key things like what's your turnover, what's your revenue, how many FTEs you've got, how many assets. You think, oh, why do they need to know all that? Well, when you get the report back, it's quite nice when you look at the data and think, well, how many companies are my size? Are we actually comparing apples with apples here? Because if you have a very, very big team, you know, it's all useful information, but how much of it you put in is up to you. It's not mandatory, the information. There's a few things that would be highlighted as mandatory, otherwise you can skip it.
And FTE is full-time equivalent person.
That's another thing. If there's something in the survey that you don't know what it means, like FTE, when you click on the field next to the, you know, where your data is going in, it'll give you an explanation. Right, move on from that one. So the most important information that you must fill in is the pay information, which you can appreciate. That goes into that Excel spreadsheet. There are loads and loads of columns in the spreadsheet that you download, but you don't need to fill all of them in. You're only going to fill in the key data that's relevant. So this is sort of what it looks like when you download it. So it'll have your organization name on the top because you've entered your login. Other than that, it's just got heaps and heaps of columns. There's like 3 alphabets worth. How much is that? Like 70, because it goes, you know, the AAs and then the BAs and CAs. Lots and lots of columns, but a lot of them you can just ignore. But when you first open it, make sure you download it and save it onto your own computer, because once you've uploaded it into the survey, it's good to have that spreadsheet so you can use it again next year. It's another thing to make it easy. So to give you an example of what we fill in, if I just look at the first section of the spreadsheet, there's 25 columns that are blue. We fill in 9 of them. And those 9, that is an employee ID code. So for Carl, that's his initials, CF, Carl Fox, right? Position, we'll call him a technical specialist, for argument's sake, one of the positions in the survey data. And sorry, I've got the select evaluation, but I don't even know what that is. We don't fill that in. Job code is the position job code. So whatever the code is for a technical specialist, I'll put that in. What region does he work in? Canterbury. When did he start in the company? His start date. Who does he identify with for his gender? Pop that in. What are his actual hours worked week to week? And what are his standard full-time hours? Sometimes it's different.
So that's like a contract hours.
Yep. Contract hours versus actual hours. And then what's his normal annual leave? Because some people might have, say, an extra week's leave, so annual leave. So that's the ones we fill in because that's the data that we find helpful to have coming back, right? But you might just fill in position and job code. You'll have to put in an employee ID. So employee ID, position and job code and annual leave. You know, you could fill that in and you'd still be compliant. So moving on to the rest of the alphabet of columns and to the other colours, we do 18 of the 38 next columns, and these are all related to pay. So we put in whether someone's on a base salary or whether they get an hourly rate, whether they get a bonus, what the actual bonus they received, and what was the max bonus they could have received. Are they a position that gets overtime? That's a yes or no question. If they did get overtime, how much was it annually? So the person who does payroll can fill that stuff in really easily. It's not difficult at all. Again, if you didn't have all that information, you just put in the information that's relevant or that you have. Medical insurance, extra leave days, and then goes into vehicle purchase, size of vehicle use, etc., through to the other benefits, KiwiSaver, subs and clubs we put in, you know, if we give people money for belonging to CSNZ, we pop that in there. And in the general notes, that's where I put if someone's a casual. So if you've got casual employees, there's a bit of, if you click on all these headings, there is guidance for what it means. So just to give you an example, and I would say we fill this in quite comprehensively. So we're filling in 10 plus 18, 28 columns of data that we're very familiar with for 15 people. So that is not onerous. And then we save that spreadsheet so that next year when we get survey and we think, I can't remember what columns we fill in because there's so many when you look at the spreadsheet, well, you just pull that up and copy and paste with the relevant data. So here's the job codes I was referring to earlier. This is when you click on that link in that email, this is what it will show you. It shows you previous salary survey categories, what the description was, and what strategic pay calls it. So if we look at in that one graduate surveyor, for example, in the previous salary surveyor, it was graduate surveyor. In the strategic pay survey, or the CSNZ survey, what it says is graduate entry, second year, third year, fourth year, and there's a code for each of those. So for argument's sake, if we just look at the code that says ENG 112, graduate third year, when you enter your job code into the spreadsheet, you also need to say whether you're talking about an engineer or a surveyor, because those codes apply across both. You do that by putting an extra code at the end. So for surveyors, it's 10, for engineers, it's 3. So if it was a surveyor who is a graduate surveyor from uni, and they're in the third year, it would be ENG 11210 would be their code in that spreadsheet. So if you're all surveyors, it's simple. They're all going to end in 10. If you've got a mix of engineers and surveyors, and you've got graduates, you should have ENG 11210, ENG 1124. If you don't know what those descriptions mean, so for example, there's one there that says senior specialist, ENG 140. What is a senior specialist? There's another link in that spreadsheet which gives you the word description of what a senior specialist means. So some of your people, you can easily pick their code by the self-explanatory title there. Otherwise, you'll need to read the actual couple of sentences which actually explain what do they mean by specialists, what do they mean by senior specialist, and what's an advanced specialist. So there's a good, you know, if you read through it, you can, if you know your roles, then you can easily say, well, this person actually fits here in the middle.
Just takes away a little bit of the inconsistency of applying for different levels. We starting to codify and yeah, make them consistent.
So here's exactly what that is talking about. So if you look at mid-level professionals, say ENG 130. So if you choose this job code for a surveyor, it would be ENG 13010. Right, and if you weren't sure, are they professional, mid-level professional, or senior professional, by reading through the code that's above and below the position, you can sort of get, you know, out of professional, mid-level professional, senior professional, where does this person fit? And usually it's a combination of the kind of responsibilities as well as their experience. So you do have to use judgment. You can't just black and white go, I'm picking this description, because you'll find that, okay, they might have them, the description might fit, but they've been in the role 20 years. Because it's not, you can't just say years of experience make somebody more competent in their role. So it might be they're still professional because of the size of projects they're involved in, Whereas someone else who might have less experience might be, you might tag them as senior professional because of the kind of clients they're dealing with, the kind of size projects they're having.
Complexity.
And the complexity of those projects, or how much money they're delivering for the company, etc. So you have to use some of your judgment to decide on the code, except for those straightforward ones like graduate first year, second year, third year, fourth year, straightforward. And that all comes from the link, the login. And if you can't find it from that login, I found every time I email Chloe, who is the person who administers this particular survey for strategic pay, she answers me straight away. Like, I can't get to my emails as quick as she does. When I say, I can't find this, where is it? She sends me the link again. So when you've finished entering your data in that Excel spreadsheet, you'll save your spreadsheet in your own computer. So you've got it for next year. And then within the survey itself, there's a button saying upload your job data spreadsheet. And you just push that button and it uploads it to the survey.
So as you can see, the first year is the most difficult. Subsequent years, you're just updating, reiterating on some existing data.
So you might go, easy, I've done it now. I've done my company financial data. I've done the employee pay data. And then there's all these 6 pages more of questions. And this is when I think, you know, for me, when I get to those, I'm kind of irritated because I want to do something else. By then, I think I've done I can understand what they've asked me so far, the financials and the pay data, but now I've got all these other questions. In reality, they're pretty easy to answer because if you know the answer to the question, it is just clicking yes or no or putting in some simple information. If they're not easy, they're probably not relevant. Just skip them. The survey doesn't stop you moving through if you skip questions. They might be things like, what do you normally, how many years do you budget for your, or plan ahead for your salary reviews? You might think, I don't even want to think about that. Well, just skip it. If you do complete it, they'll stay in there till the next year. So somewhere that's slightly more complex in here than easy is, for example, entering all the charge out rates. So it has a sort of a table with different levels of positions which relate to those job codes. So you've got more junior roles, middle roles, and senior roles, and you've got to write in what the range of their charge out rate. It are not mandatory. You don't need to fill them in. If you do, however, it means there's more data about charge out rates in the survey, and your particular data will be in your survey next year, and you can just update it easier than having to enter it. Yeah, and yeah, so that's that point, that any extra data you do put in helps with those extra reports if you want them. So at the end of doing all those questions, you've uploaded your spreadsheet, you've put your company financial data in, and you've answered as many of the 6 pages of other information about your people trends that you want to answer. And the very last page, you push done, and that's it, it's done. If you missed uploading your spreadsheet at that stage, it will tell you, I haven't got the job data, because that's actually the most important thing you need to upload. So assuming you've actually completed the survey and got through that pain, in a couple of months' time, you will get the report. Or if you're a company that wasn't able to contribute, you'll be able to get that through Wendy. So the report, how that links into how you pay your people is something to think about. So if you're going to use this market data as one of the contributing factors to when you do your pay reviews, then it's just something to think about. When does this information come out? How old is it when I do my review? Because if it comes out in September and you normally do your reviews in July, then by the time next July comes along, it's quite old data. So I'm not saying you need to change your date, it's just bearing that in mind. How old is that data when you see it? Yeah. So it's a good idea to have a policy, formal or informal, depending on what context your company is, of how you pay against the market. So what I mean by policy is when you're looking at the data, for example, it might give you the midpoint of the base salary as one of the columns. And a policy is saying, for our employees, we're going to pay them at least the midpoint, or we're going to pay them between here and here of the midpoint. So, and that policy is entirely up to you. Or you might say, we're always going to pay everyone 110% of the midpoint because this report comes out, so late compared to we're looking at it so late. And the reason I talk about having a policy is it helps with transparency and fairness. So when I'm talking about transparency, some people like to share the data with their team completely. Other people would not share the data with their team, but might share the policy. So at Fox, to give you that example, we don't share out the whole report with people. And in my experience with other companies, they don't either. And partly that's because it's very hard to know your way around the report when it's not something you're looking at, purposely. And it's also, obviously, there's discretion from you as a manager when you're applying your pay policy of how you pay people against that market. So unless you're going to pay them exactly what the number says in the survey, looking at the survey just raises a whole lot of questions that you may or may not be prepared to answer. Whereas if you can actually say to people, we pay within 80% and 120% of the market rate, we use the biggest database available for that market data, and we consider other factors, including what your experience is on the job, how you've performed in your job, to inform that pay decision. And hopefully you've talked to people about those kind of things so they know how well they're doing on their job. They obviously know how experienced they are, but how important that is to you, so that when they receive their pay, they do feel like it's fair, but they know that you're using some informed outside data.
You're benchmarking. And so, as Tonya was saying, you've got to take into consideration a whole variety of things. What can your company afford? How is this person performing in that role against maybe people on the same role within the same company?
Yeah, so the key reason for having the report is so you can compare your own data to the external report. So at Fox here, we input our data to that salary survey in July, obviously, which is now, and we also do our annual reviews, so our discussions with our team on how their performance has been over the year in July. The salary report comes out sometime in September, and we consider that report output before doing our salary increases, which are effective 1st of November. So even though we've done our annual reviews in July, our actual calendar for increases starts on 1st of November, and this makes it very easy for us to use the report data to inform that decision. And everybody knows that's the timeline. So I appreciate this is sort of going outside of strictly how to put information into the survey, but the reason I've done this is it's kind of like, if you don't really have a reason for having the data in there, what's the point of putting it in?
Yes.
And our key reason for putting it in there is so that we've got it at salary review time. So at our salary review time, we will first be going, how did that position data for our engineering specialist over here, or our technical specialist, how did that compare to the market data in the survey for that code? So we'd look up the code, look up the data, and go, oh, look, that there was 70 people in the data for that, and the position moved this much. That then informs our decision. It doesn't make our decision, but it gives us some information, because we have a salary band of between 90 and 110% of the base salary. So we'll look at our engineering specialist and go, is his current role between 90 and 110% of that new number? But the other factors influencing our review will be, what was his or her performance over the year? What's their experience level? What are the external economic factors impacting us, e.g. CPI or labour cost index? And what's our actual budget? So everything has to fit into that. So when you're actually looking at the output from the report, these are the pages we would be going to. So we're talking here about that graduate third year surveyor. We know the code was ENG 112. So on this piece, each position code has a page like this in the report. So up in the top right-hand corner, you can see the position code, ENG 112. And the description is graduate third year. And those blue columns tell you what the data in the report is. So you've got data about who was in the survey, so the total sample of organisations, number of jobs, number of people. Then you've got some columns about base salary information. Then you've got fixed rem, which means not including bonuses. So it means anything that you've got on top of your wages or salary that's fixed but not changeable. And then total remuneration. I can't say that word. I don't know about anyone else. I can read it, but I find it hard to say. So if you just move to the next page. So if we were looking at just a surveyor, we're thinking, not really interested in all those other disciplines. If you look at that yellow highlight, I could choose, well, look, there were 17 people in this group, 17 jobs in this group, and their median base salary was 80K. So this is how we would use it. Wouldn't look at all the other information on the sheet, would just look at that. If there was only one person, so see if you were a hydrogeologist and there's only one, there wouldn't be any data in there. So you might look at the whole group. And what's the difference? The median base salary here for the survey is 80,000 that we've got circled, whereas for the whole group, the median up the top, Carl, was 75. So obviously, of the data submitted for third year graduates, land surveyors were more expensive than the others. So you can decide which data you want to use. Do you want to use the whole group of everyone who's called ENG 112, or do you want to focus it down on civil or land surveyors or whatever? That's kind of how you put the information in and how you get the information out. I'm now moving to the, if you like, the tips and tricks bit. So something that quite often happens in real life is you have got non-standard roles that do not fit into the job codes. So a good example of this might be your person who's a business manager. So take a senior manager, for example. So you might see that there's job codes for CEOs, or general managers, and then job codes for professionals, like say senior surveyor. And you might say, oh, this business manager is a combination of those roles. You wouldn't really put them just in CEO or just in senior surveyor. And my recommendation would be, don't bother putting those people in, because you'll have difficulty with choosing a job code, but use the data that comes out to inform your decisions still. So you can just use again, you go to the page for both those two roles and get out the relevant data and do a bit of we'll use 30% of this one and 70% of this one. The other option for you of non-standard roles is you can get them job sized by strategic pay, but you have to pay for that. You've got to pay a consulting fee, and then they would give you the data for that job size. But this way works pretty well. Yeah, really, my only other tips are prepare by having a pay policy, actually giving yourself, I think 2.5 hours was overly generous in time, Carl, really.
Okay.
But if you thought, well, I want to review all my pay data, I want to get my job codes right, that's probably a realistic window to give yourself. And the other key point is just enter what you find relevant, ignore the rest. Keep it simple. First time you do it, all that data will be kept and build it up later. That's it. I'm not sure what the time is. Oh, great, perfect. So we're aiming to close up at 3. So that was the presentation. If anybody has any questions now, that you can put your hand up and, we can do that verbally, or you can put it in the chat, whatever you feel comfortable with. Anybody there?
Carl and Tonya, it's Wendy here. One point, that non-standard role,
Yes.
every year we are asked if there's any new roles we want to include.
Perfect. Yeah.
So if anyone does have a non-standard role, we're allowed so many before they charge us. So it would be really helpful for anyone to feed that information to us, so we can feed that on.
Perfect. So what you're saying is, instead of individually as a company going to strategic pay and getting, paying the consulting fee to get that information, there might be 10 different companies that have a similar non-standard code, and we can get that done as a group.
Yeah, well, we're given so many, and if we're long as we can, change something around, it's always possible. Good to ask. And
what that means, then you have a good description code of that, different position in the following year's reports. So that's excellent. You've got that ability. Any other questions, comments? Did you come in with a question that wasn't answered that you might like to raise?
Would it be helpful for CSNZ to also collect some data on how we are charging for equipment utilisation?
So do you want to comment on that, Carl?
Yeah, look, that has been a discussion I've had with 1 or 2 CSNZ members at workshop, and I probably would need to understand whether that's something that can fit into strategic pay. We do an annual practice survey. CSNZ continues to do an annual practice survey, and it's whether it falls in there or falls within the salary survey. So Wendy, maybe if you can just record that for the management committee.
The next question, Rachel, yes, is the answer to that. So the REM data is entered at the time, it's live pay data today, and your financial info is just, at your year end. Perfect. Anybody else? Yes, yep, you can enter time in lieu, yeah. There's just, like I said, there's 3 alphabets of columns. You can enter more. Can third parties purchase the reports?
So yes, so for the companies that cannot participate, CSNZ felt that it would be unfair to charge. Wendy, you can confirm if that's still the policy. But third parties can purchase these reports, but if everybody just purchases a report and never
Puts
contributes,
data in.
then we are sort of missing out a bit.
Well, it'll get less and less relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So while that is possible, I would request that people, yes.
Only do
Participate.
that if you can't participate
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
Yeah. No, so as I understand it, it is effectively, in order to purchase, you'd need to be a member of CSNZ or ACE.
Yeah.
Not some party, that is not a member of those two organisations. Now, just to let you know, we will need to get off before 3 o'clock because the Zoom account will be used by Survey and Spatial.
But if there's any other questions, just direct them to Wendy. I will send Wendy this slide show and hope you all have a great afternoon.
And on behalf of CSNZ, thank you very much, Carl and Tonya, for giving this webinar and helping everybody fill in the survey. I look forward to lots of surveys coming in this week.
So just remember, the first time's the worst. After that, it's a lot easier.
And we're happy to help.
Thank you.
Ka kite.
See you guys.
Yeah. Thank you, Carl and Tonya. Much appreciated.
No problem. Hope you could hear okay.
Yeah, no, it was excellent. And yeah, listen, it was really good actually. It gave it a really nice explanation. And I think you kept emphasizing they don't have to fill it in if it's not appropriate, which I think is really helpful because I think that's the thing. There's so many columns to start with.
Yeah, that's why I actually put in the slideshow which columns we went in so you could just copy and paste. You know, people can just do just that.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think they've actually, because we've asked for less columns, they're slowly improving it, but they're slowly updating their software. So
yeah.
All right then, Wendy, good to see you. We'll catch up with you soon.
Yep, sounds good.
We'll just send you these slides and you can distribute them as you see fit. Okay.
Thanks.
Have a nice day.
You too.
Bye-bye.